This is strange.
Okay, Chairman, we are now on YouTube, so you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you everybody and good evening. We'll get straight into the agenda, if we may. So item number 1, which is the minutes. That was for the meeting of the 30th of June. They've been published on the council's website. Is everybody happy with their accuracy, or if they have any comments to make? I will take silence and thumbs up as a sign of approval. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to all our observers tonight. You're all very welcome. Fiona, any apologies for absence and substitutions, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We've got apologies this evening from Councillor Mirrlees, and Councillor Hyman is attending as a substitute, and Councillor Hegan is temporarily filling the vacancy for the Liberal Democrats.
Okay,
and
thank you to
he's
both.
A substitute member who's attending.
Brilliant. Thank you to both Jerry and Joan. You're very welcome. Declarations of interest, any given?
None received, Chairman.
Okay, questions from members of the public?
No questions from members of the public, and none from members either.
We're doing well. So we'll go straight into item number 6. Yasmin, could you outline, please, and take us through it?
Thank you, Chairman. So if I draw the committee's attention to page 8 of the agenda, you'll find the tracker, scrutiny tracker of the recommendations. So you should be used to seeing that now. So keep track of how the recommendations are going that the committee's made. Section B on page 9 is the work programme. So looking forward to what this committee has coming up at the November meeting, we'll see. You can see that we've got the Safer Waverley Partnership. That's something the committee looks at every year, a yearly review of Safer Waverley Partnership. So that's on the agenda for November. As always, we'll have the corporate performance report. The committee also has another opportunity to consider the draft corporate strategy. It's on the agenda for this evening, but it also is on is timetabled for the November meeting too. So obviously it'll be a further along version at that point. And you'll notice that we've got a service level agreement working group update on there as well. So we've met with the chair of that working group, Councillor Els, to talk about the latest developments and the landscape of the service level agreement, the organisations we have those with. So as you'll understand, that a lot has been changing and continues to change. So we're going to stay on top of that and make sure that that working group gets back to work as soon as is appropriate. So that's the work programme looking forward, and yeah, and you'll see that progress on page 10 of that scrutiny review. I didn't have anything else I wanted to raise, Chairman. I just wanted to make sure the committee was aware of what to expect in November. Thank you. I'm trying to find you on my screen. Yeah, that's it, I think, from me. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of things before I open it up. And if people wish to speak, there's obviously the hands up button on the chat. If you haven't got that function, because I know some of you on iPads, just wave your arms about. I'm sure one of us will see it. Just a couple of things, just for clarity. Top of page 9, which is the Aging Well Strategy Action Group. We've obviously got Councillor Cossa shown as that. We will need a replacement. So I'm looking, though I've got lots of faces on my screen, for one of our members to replace Councillor Cossa on that. I don't know, Mary, if you want, as it was a, would you mind taking that on as Councillor Cossa had that as a, thank you very much. So that if we can just amend that.
Okay.
And on page 9, obviously, there's a lot of TBCs at the bottom on date for O&S consideration.
Yeah.
We just need to obviously populate that in due course. I think
course.
that's all the points I've got. So opening it up to the members.
Councillor Rubini has got his hand up to indicate he'd like to speak.
Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on page 10, the Safer Waverley Partnership, outcomes and priorities, Safer Waverley Partnership. As we know on the news and other media, there is a really big input for crime, or so we're told, on rural crime. Now, Waverley is a rural area. I've been on to my local officers and they tell me that they can't classify rural crime. There's no stats available for it. We have, or the police have absolutely no way of being able to tell what rural crime is, where it's happening, and what's going on. I wondered if the Safer Partnership could take something on to try and look at this sort of crime, because, as you know, it is headline, and we've got no way of dealing with it.
Okay, I mean, I think as far as I'm aware, there is a rural crime officer, so there must be some definitions, because otherwise, what's their job profile? So, Andrew,
If I may, Chair, I spoke to the rural crime officer for Waverley, Dave Boxall, and he's the one that said he's got no figures, can't get any figures, and there's nothing on his computer.
Okay, thank you for that, John. Katie, Andrew, is that something you can take back on our behalf?
I can feedback. It's the way crime is reported. This has come up as an issue. It's the fact that when it's a break-in and things, it's reported as a criminal break-in rather than just rural crime. So that's what they'd have to do, is take it down a step level to locations rather than based on what the actual crime is. And this has come up within the our joint action group meetings, that it is because of the way it's reported. So I'll feedback that. We've got a new inspector, Sam Adcock, that we're due to meet, and I'll feed that back with her. But it is the way it's been reported more than we don't have rural crime.
Okay, thank you. And we have the normal yearly presentation in November. So Councillor Rubini, that's sort of good timing, because hopefully by November she would have found her feet and be able to give us sort of a feel for what the rural crime. But absolutely support what you say. So if you could feedback that we'd like something in November, just a brief on where we are. And again, Andrew, you've acknowledged that. So thank you for that. Any other comments? I can't see any hands up, but then I'm not sure I will do here.
There's no other hands up, Chair.
Okay. So if we have no other views, thank you, Yasmin, for that. Appreciate it's probably been a lot quieter on our action plan than it normally would be, but possibly it's allowed a few things to catch up anyway. So we will move on from that, if we may. Draft corporate strategy, Louise, if you could take the lead, please.
Thanks, Chairman. So the covering report sets out clearly the importance of the corporate strategy for driving the direction of the council and what it wants to achieve in the next few years. So you've got a draft in front of you, and as you know, and many of you were there last week at 2 workshops where a lot of feedback was given, and I've sort of collected all that, and we're already sort of starting to move on to sort of the next draft. So some of the opinions last week were very much, there's a long list there, for example, so I'm going to be sort of grouping these into different areas. So tonight is an opportunity for your committee to sort of have a look at how, in particular, the community wellbeing aspects of the strategy are looking, seeing whether you think there's anything we've overlooked or strengthen or take out or whatever. So I'd be happy to take any comments and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. And you're right, many of us have been on the sessions that we've gone through this, and they were quite lengthy but very productive. But again, if I can just steer people, this is about the community wellbeing aspects that we want to raise, and we really, it's points that we haven't already raised, which would, I think, would be most welcome, because otherwise we're just repeating what we've already said. And we'll be seeing the document again in November's meeting, so we should get obviously the up-to-date document with the amendments made from the suggestions. So opening it up, members, please. I've got Councillor Else. I've got the first hand up.
Thank you. So the list through our 5-year corporate strategy, we will, number 2 on page 17, is to develop a more open, inclusive approach to communications and decision making. I just wanted to check with you whether it was a good idea going forward to have a lot of Waverley's aspirations and ambitions, shall we say, put out on social media by individual councillors, or does this mean that there will be a lot of official information put out on social media and in the papers? Because we do see an increasing level of information on social media which is not actually official, and I wonder whether that is a good thing or whether it's actually considered to be not desirable. That I just would question that.
Okay, can I just answer that point first,
Yeah.
Councillor Elson, and go. This is the Waverley Borough's corporate strategy. It's not an individual's corporate strategy. This is Waverley Borough's corporate strategy. So these comments should be the aspirations and the vision and the strategy of Waverley Borough Council, and not individuals and how they interpret it and everything else. So does that help you?
Well, it does, because that confirms what I had suspected was the case. But I wonder how the strategy can deal with the fact that we do get so many individual, personal pieces of information from councillors on social media. And I'm wondering whether the strategy ought to be able to deal with that. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Other views? I think Louise took that note down. Councillor Hyman, I saw your hand up.
Chairman, Councillor Dixon indicated before I did. I saw her hand up. I'm happy to defer to her.
Yeah, I didn't see, but Councillor Dixon, please.
Yes, sorry,
Go ahead.
ask you to reiterate. These bullet points at the end, 23. I think one of the things that came out of the meeting I was at, that these were going to be split under the five headings. Is that because we've got the vision, which has got 9 bullets, and then we've got 23 actions, and I think we said to make more sense of it, we would try and group the 5-year corporate strategy under certain headings. Is that going to happen? I think you said it was. I wasn't sure.
Yes, if I may, Chairman, just to respond to that, I'm already working on another draft which does group them, and the leadership have said that that's a good idea as well. So I am working on that.
Okay, and in response to Councillor Else, I'm not quite sure what the rules are specifically for Waverley with regard to social media, but I know for my employer, if you misbehave on social media to the detriment of your employer, you know, you risk disciplinary action. So if councillors are posting, I'm on social media all the time, but I'm really careful what I post, because I don't post anything that's confidential. I only post official documents, and if you look at what I'm doing, it's very, very, very careful. And if anyone's doing something different to that, then they probably are in breach of conduct somewhere along the line. But yeah.
I think that's probably a good summary. It's something that probably goes into members' conduct rather than necessarily a strategy, because a strategy should be where, you know, I'm looking at Tom now, where Tom, you know, at the moment has got a list of 23. It should be a strategy that tells Tom where does he put his resources, what are his priorities, you know, where, you know, if something's got to give, what is the must-haves for your corporate strategy. And I think, and I said this in our meeting before, and Louise, to Louise, is I think this is just far too much for Tom as a chief executive to know exactly where does he put all the resources and his efforts into. But I think though a lot of these points were put forward in the last meeting, I think it's just unfortunate this wellbeing scrutiny has come probably too quick to get the next version, which is why this is more about just updating the views if anything else has happened. But I think they're all valid points, and I can see Louise is scribbling away, and we'll take those points down. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm having a little bit of difficulty in understanding where we're starting from, because we did have the workshop. I thought there were 2 workshops and, you know, separating us apart. So from that point of view, it would be very difficult for any of us to know what was said at the other one. And so we wouldn't know what has already been said. And so how are we meant to build on what's been said if we don't know what it was, is a starting point. As far as these are concerned, there was a hurry last year with the new administration to put together something which sort of belonged to them, as opposed to the inherited corporate strategy from the Conservatives, which was only 18 months old or so, which a lot of effort had gone into. And whilst one of our members I know called it motherhood and apple pie, and that summed it up very well. It was more a wish list, really, of what the new administration wanted, perhaps, that nobody would actually vote against. So nobody, as far as I know. It remains the same, except for the saving grace of the version last year was that it fitted on 2 sides, and now it fits onto 4. And as was said at one of the workshops, there's a lot of repetition in there, and a lot of that seems to be unnecessary. My concern is that the way you would normally work is that you would have a vision, and a vision, of course, is something you can imagine. And in the sort of circumstances we're in at Waverley, you know, we're not a business or vision or whatever. A lot of what we're doing is trying to preserve what we've already got, not to be taken over by Surrey County Council and not to be removed from existence, perhaps, or unless we happen to want to be disbanded. Also, we don't want the new planning white paper necessarily, perhaps, and a lot of this is very difficult stuff to put into a vision. A vision for us would be, well, you know, what are the changes from where we are now? The 9 bullet points that we've got: open, democratic, and participative governance. Read all of the press releases, everything that's been said in the chamber over the past 5 years, Chairman. We've achieved, supposedly, financially sound Waverley, well, apart from since COVID, up till 6 months ago, or a couple of years ago, we were always saying, well, that's what we've got. Valuing residents, all of these 9 bullet points, we would say we've already achieved, actually, and have said in the past that we have. So I don't see those as being any sort of vision, really. You know, I think it would have a vision would have to be definite changes which we intend to bring about from where we are now, or where we were 6 months ago, perhaps, to where we want to be in the given time frame. We would then have definite objectives, as it says just above our vision on page 16. It says corporates. It's in order to realise our vision and objectives. So, you know, we need to know what those objectives are so that we know whether we agree with them or not, whether they're a jolly good idea or whether there's some better ones we should set. And that means SMART targets. We then have to have, for each of the, bringing it forward to us, we're looking supposedly at the strategy that we are going to follow in order to attain those objectives. And from that strategy, there will be a plan, and that goes cascaded out through the service plans and the local plan and everything else that we've got. So we need to know tonight, and at each of the coming O&S committee meetings, which ones apply to us. Apparently that's going to be done after the meeting. That's no good to us now. We don't know which ones apply to which portfolio holder, who we would hold accountable and responsible for each of these. They haven't been classified. If we spend an hour going through all of these, frankly, I think we'd have wasted our time, because we need to have them classified and separated into which are ours. Otherwise, we'll get political comments about, you know, what individual councillors might be doing that might be getting in the way and that sort of thing, instead of really concentrating on what we're meant to be doing, which is giving our executive officers a steer and giving the executive a steer in how we think this can be improved. And, you know, I don't know where we go to here. We need measurable and defined objectives, you know, an imaginable vision. And we need to know who's going to be responsible for each of those, so that they can come in front of us as a committee and we can ask them questions about it as to, you know, what's where there are gaps, and there are certainly gaps in this. You know, how do they particularly individually define affordable? Because we don't have a definition of affordable. It's whatever we want to think it is. We've got in number 3, a fair, future-proof financial settlement. What's fair mean? You know, how do we, as long as all of these things indefinite statements, then it is just motherhood and apple pie and a bunch of words. And what's the point in wasting time on going through it? I've no idea even what's different to what it was in the last one. There's no track changes. This might be the same thing that everybody said was fine last year, in which case, if everyone's going to vote for it without looking at it, I'm not going to bother getting into the details. So, Chairman, I think this needs to be brought back. I gather it will be. I don't know that we need to really get into it tonight.
Right, I'll try and take some of those points, but probably more generic, some of your points. I know the session I was involved in, I don't think it was the same one as you, because I don't think you're on that one. A lot of the points that you've just raised, we raised, that really, that's not a vision. You know, 23 corporate strategies, you know. Yeah, another example, point 17, issue approval for the Dunsfold New Garden Village. So do we issue approval for a rubbish plan? No, it's about having something fit for purpose, something where, you know, there are lots and lots of issues. And I think certainly in the meeting we were present, the points were put very firmly across. And I think Louise actually accepted a large number of the points that were made, how it was just a wish list, you know. And I think the point I made, which echoes yours, well, what does it actually mean? What do these words mean? How do we measure it? What's the targets? Is there going to be documents behind that? Because otherwise it's just a document that will gather dust. So I think the points that you make are well made. I reiterate the point I made. I think, unfortunately, we've probably seen the original version because it hasn't been amended. And I think that does curtail, I suppose, the value we can put into it tonight, because we've already done that once and we haven't seen what's come back from our feedback. I think for me tonight is, are there any additional points, is number one. And is there anything additionally on our community wellbeing that maybe we didn't raise because we were doing more generic points that we want to raise now? I think November, Jerry, will be the meeting where we can say, what does that mean? That doesn't make any sense at all. These are the questions that we would want to know. So
Chairman,
in some ways,
right.
I've got...
Sorry.
I think you've lost your signal there. I think I've been saved by the bell because I think you've just lost your signal. We'll come back to you, Jerry. Your signal's all frozen and your words aren't coming out. If I can just go to Councillor Rubini next, please.
Am I live or not?
Sorry?
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I don't have a problem with the signal, I don't think.
I don't know if it was just me, but your signal was frozen, I think, and it's jumping, and I lost your words as well. So we'll come back to you, Jerry, if we may. It's while we've got others waiting. Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chair. On page 17, Zach is bound to know I'm going to raise this, but the third bullet point down from the top, responsible planning and development, supporting local communities with neighbourhood planning and engagement in planning policy. And then bullet point number 14 at the bottom of the page, work to ensure that our local plan and neighbourhood plans are consistent with meeting local needs and protecting the green belt. An increased focus on engagement with the government to promote rebalancing the planning system in favour of localism. We do have problems here. We haven't got a neighbourhood plan in force yet, although the planning department know what it says, and we appear to be in conflict with government figures in trying to impose or suggest to Waverley that the community have spoken, and there's a huge amount of correspondence going on about a planning application that, as I say, may well be in conflict with the planning department because of the numbers of housing required. So I'm not sure how we push that forward if we've got this conflict ourselves. Presumably we'll have to resolve this somehow. Anyway, that's my point. AGLV and AONB we feel is also equivalent to green belt, but we'll have to sort it out somehow.
Okay, thank you. I've got a number of people with their hands up. I've got Yasmin next, Councillor Forashevsky, and then Councillor Else. And then we'll see. I've lost Councillor Hyman off my screen at the moment, so we'll try him at the end. Can I just, one point which has been raised by Tom, obviously I know a number of us did attend those presentations, but from this committee, if there are members who didn't attend those presentations, you know, put out your comments. We can soon clarify whether that's been repeated before and been raised. So please shout, because I've assumed that everybody was there. So please shout once those speakers, any other comments you want to make, just put your hands up. So Yasmin.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm speaking on behalf of Councillor Mirrlees, who's unable to attend this evening, but I did speak to her yesterday to get her views on the agenda and to feed those into the committee. So she had various comments on the corporate strategy. I'll stick to the ones that relate to this committee and community wellbeing. Point 8, I believe it's page 16. She's very, no, it can't be page 16, sorry, it must be 17. Very, very pleased to see that we've got something in there about Waverley training services, particularly in that over COVID, that there will have been young people who haven't necessarily had access to the same educational resources that they would have had anyway before. So that she was very pleased to see that. She did actually mention an initiative that's happens in Farnham that's about they repair computers to give to children to make sure they have access to education. Now, she appreciates that that's not directly linked to Waverley training services, it's quite tangential from that, but it was something that's definitely related to this committee in terms of community wellbeing, and that's an initiative she was very keen to publicise and promote. I'm afraid I'm not sure what the title was. She wasn't certain on the name, but I can look that up if other committee members wanted to know. She did have a couple of questions. Point 16 about crime. So Katie might be able to help particularly on this one. She wanted to know which the partners or the stakeholders in particular we work with. So it's the line is improve and develop engagement with stakeholders to better control crime and antisocial behaviour. So that's one question. I'm just going to list them all so it can get this feedback out of the way. And then the point about 21 about loneliness. So support the most vulnerable in our communities, particularly those experiencing socialisation and loneliness. So Councillor Mirrlees was very keen to see that in there and wanted to raise the fact that not all older people or vulnerable people will have the same needs. And I think that's something that when we've been talking about the service level agreements in the past, that particularly Andrew and Katie had recognised, and that when we have the work of the service level agreement organisation working group, well, part of that is to look at the needs, the actual needs of the whole community, and to assess which organisations we wanted to fund. So those were a couple of things from Councillor Mirrlees, and I think the only question really was about the stakeholder partners. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forashevsky.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and good evening, everyone. Yes, I've listened with a great deal of interest to what's been said so far, and looking from the outside in, I do really feel that the points on page 17 and 18 do come across very much as a wish list, but we have to manage our expectations and start somewhere. And I think the points raised by yourself and Councillor Hyman are very, very important to note the success of the strategy if we're to look at it in detail and adopt it. But what I would say is on the introduction on paragraph 3 on page 15, we are facing a huge uncertainty such as the effect of Brexit and the UK in Waverley, particularly on the finalisation of Brexit at the end of this year, the likelihood of a second peak of coronavirus and the possibility that Waverley may cease to exist as a council after 2022. Our revised strategy needs to consider this. Council will respond to the uncertainties in order to protect service delivery in the interest of our residents. So, you know, you've really got to feel for Waverley, our residents and our councillors and our officers, that with this uncertain time ahead of us, how are we supposed to manage expectations when we don't know what the future holds? That's just an observation from the outside looking in. When I think about the work that needs to be doing, it could be all undone because paragraph 3 here on page 15 is very, very powerful. Going forward, I very much would like to see an adoption of a mental health policy strategy that includes suicide. As you know, during my mayoral year, we worked very closely with Surrey County Council and other bodies which looked at this in great detail. Surrey County Council already have a strategy that we can adopt instantly without having to reinvent the wheel. And what I will do, if it's with your permission, Chairman, is take this offline and take it up with Louisa, because a lot of work has already been done. And what I don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. But I think a lot of the points look specifically at particular issues, but it doesn't focus on the one issue that is the single biggest killer of men under 50 out there, which is suicide. And I think suicide in general should be looked at and should be taken into account. And I would just reiterate, we already have a strategy, it's already there. All we need to do is adopt it into our Waverley strategy going forward. But I would once again just point out that that paragraph is very, very powerful, because we're all in such difficult times and we really don't know the outcome, but that shouldn't stop us working hard going forward to make sure we're doing everything we possibly can to ensure our residents are protected from all angles. Thank you, Chairman.
And you have my full support on that one. You know, it sort of covers it in point 21, but actually I think it needs to be spelt out. So I think you certainly have my support, and I'm sure everybody else is on this committee. I can't see anybody who is indicating they wouldn't support that. I think it's Councillor Else next, Zach Elwood, and then we'll try Jerry again.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say again, and I did point this out at the meeting about the strategy, but I want to really emphasise that I don't see anything about our staff in this strategy, and if we haven't got a happy staff force, we can't deliver anything. So I really would like to see them mentioned somewhere. I did say that last week or Monday, whenever it was, but I want to say it again. It really has to be included, I think. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure Louise will note that down again. I think I've got Zach.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just a very quick one. I think Councillor Hyman's actually said what I was going to mention in response to Councillor Rabini's point about the local plan and the Hazelmere issues. He sent in the chat a note that next Tuesday, the 22nd, the local plan is going to the Environment O&S, and obviously they'll be discussing lots of things, including the proposed allocations. So I just wanted to just repeat that's next Tuesday, 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else before I go back to Councillor Hyman? No, Councillor Hyman, let's see if we can get you this time.
I did in the chat ask also whether we can please tell us which of these bullet points are actually considered to be within our remit, so that we can discuss each of them if we are going to discuss them. I've got 23 and I really can't work out which of them are ours to talk about, and obviously you don't want me going through 23 of them. Can someone clarify that for us so that we know, or should we defer it to another day?
Well, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, Councillor Hyman, the problem is this is the old version. It needs work and it needs to be put into groups. So the issues that come under really community well-being should be clear to us so we know what's being said. At the moment, it's sort of scattered over the 23 points, which I think everybody's accepted is not the best way forward. So this comes back in November. What we would hope, I suppose our plea to Louise, is the points that relate to community wellbeing are grouped. They are clear in what they say. There's sort of no nebulous comments, so we know exactly what the comments mean, and very clear what we're trying to achieve, who's trying to achieve it, what is the measurement of success, etc., etc. How do we measure it? We will know a little bit more by that time. You're absolutely right. It's scattered all over the place, and it makes it very, very difficult to go through. And I think basically we said this at our presentation, and you've reiterated the points that we made. So in November, which is only 4 or 5 weeks' time, our meeting, we should be in a position, and I'm looking at Louise, just in case she nods her head the wrong way, that we should have all of ours be very, very clear out of whatever number there is, which ones are we going to be responsible for scrutinising. Does that answer your question, Jerry? I know we can't do it tonight. We're doing it more as a generic.
I'm happy. Yes. Yeah, I'm happy with that, but I think we also need to make sure that we have got the objectives to which we can hold people responsible and accountable, because otherwise it's because that is what we're about as an O&S committee. I don't see any point if we, and also perhaps to have the relative portfolio holders present at our meeting so we can ask questions of them, because obviously the idea was that we were going to sort this out today. They were going to go away, produce a final version, and that final version would simply be ticking up, any last final details in the November meeting, so we can presumably put it through in the December council meeting as a new, as the updated as a strategy. So, and if we leave all of the consideration till November, we'll simply be putting that off and upsetting the executive. So, and we're going to have the same problem. I'm on value for money, but I'm substitute on all of the other committees, and I just foresee having exactly the same game in the coming 3 meetings. And I think we ought to try and sort it out now as the first one, so as to what we're doing and what committees should do in case they want to take it off of their agenda, so that we don't read it and people don't spend time on it until that bit of work's done. I wouldn't have thought it's a difficult bit of work, but we want the accountable people there. We want to know exactly whose portfolio it is.
Oh, I don't know if everybody else, but I've just lost.
It's probably covered by a couple of portfolios, Madam Chairman. Thanks.
Right, we lost you and your picture's frozen, but a couple of points. I would like to think that as soon as the next draft of the corporate strategy is prepared, it will be circulated. It certainly doesn't have to wait, in my view, for the papers to go out for this committee. So that'd be my first point. The 2 people who it's likely to be that we will be holding to account will be Kelvin Mills and Andrew Smith. They are the 2 managers who hold the bits I would imagine that we will have the scrutiny over. So unless there's a change in responsibilities, they should be at our meeting. I'm sure if they're not, they will have somebody present. So that should be present. I am not sure whether they'll be at the stage of having agreed targets and everything else by that stage, because we're only talking about 5 weeks. But I think if nothing else, there should be some sort of indication of where it's going. Louise, I don't know if you sort of can give us a bit more on what you think we'd be having for this meeting in 5 weeks' time.
Yes, Chairman. I mean, the timetable is a really tight one. So the idea is, the plan is that by the next cycle, you will get a pretty final version of the strategy. But of course, you know that's your opportunity to scrutinise the version that will be published. So you'll have that opportunity to scrutinise a pretty final version. But I take your point that in the interim, if there is something we can circulate and get further views, then of course we will.
Okay, I think that would be useful. So there may be issues that can be resolved prior to this meeting. So when we do have the meeting in November, we can be a little bit more focused on specific issues. So I think that's probably as far as we can take it tonight. Has anybody got any other views or wishes to make any other points before I move us on? Please shout or wave your arms. I'm looking around all the different screens. And hopefully that's given Louise a good steer, but also Tom as the Chief Exec on the views on what we would expect for the next meeting and how we can then contribute a little bit more. Because I think it's a bit frustrating, and I do understand that we can't really do much tonight. But thank you for your debate anyway. I think it has helped focus a little bit. So the recommendation on that, excuse me while I'm just going through. So the recommendation, reason for the recommendation overview and scrutiny considers a revised draft corporate strategy. So the report makes a recommendation to the executive as appropriate. I think those generic recommendations have been made, and that reflects what other people have given. So is everybody happy with that recommendation? Yep, good, thank you. Sort of got a nod from Jerry, then a shake, but I think I know where you're coming from. Okay, if we can move on please to agenda item 8, which is the RCT resilience. Andrew, I think yourself and Katie are going to give an update on this.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, that'll be Katie, and I'm here to answer questions afterwards.
Fiona, there should be a presentation, isn't there? Sorry. Fiona, am I able to move the slides along, or do I need to ask you to do it?
You're muted, Fiona. You're not coming through to me. I don't know if anyone else can hear you.
No, I can't.
Give it a go and see if you can move it.
Sorry, Katie. Yes, you'll have to tell me when you want the slides moved forward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you can move straight on to the next one. Thanks, Fiona. Thank you. Yeah, so this is a kind of a brief update around the Community Resilience Project, which is part of the Recovery, Change and Transformation Programme. I thought it was just easier just to put it in a few sort of PowerPoints, because I've brought bringing to you some of the surveys and research that has been sort of happening since post-COVID-19. And as we sort of coming out of lockdown, you know, the aim of the project has to really implement a clear understanding of the impact of the pandemic on the voluntary community and faith sector, and look at recording the responses that have been implemented and demonstrate the outlook for the future, and also look at long-term, well, actually short-term, medium and long-term plans to engage with the community and also support our residents within the community. For information, the project board is also got external partners on. We've got various officers from across Waverley. We have Voluntary Action South West Surrey, because they support a variety of the voluntary faith sector. We have Surrey County Council, which is including their adult social care and their some of their transformation officers, and because they're carrying out a lot of the research for Surrey and how it's impacted. We have Farnham, North East, Hants CCG. We have Surrey Community Action. They're very related to the particularly our buildings, our community buildings. and we have Surrey Heartlands Integrated Care Partnership. So we have really sort of quite a good external facing board to look at our community impact. Fiona, the next slide. So there's two key project objectives which I've sort of brought for you for this meeting. And so one of them is to create a plan to continue implementing the successful interventions in the short term. That was the initial objective, but what it's also looking at is certainly in the short, medium and longer term, because what we're finding as our residents are coming out of lockdown, we obviously, there are various different needs that are affecting our residents depending on the age, where they live, whether they've gone into furlough, whether they've been made redundant, lost their job. So it's quite a varied community that we're supporting. I don't need to sort of read them all out if you have a quick glance, but it's a key part of it has been about gathering the data so that we can really identify the trends and the cohorts, which is really so that we can understand our residents' needs. And there has been, like I said, a variety of different surveys and data gathering so that we can bring that all together. We've also been evaluating and still evaluating the development of the initiatives with the partners that were provided during the COVID-19 and the impact it has had on them. One of the other aims within that project objective is to building a support structure with our partners to help our residents, because one of the things that we are really beginning to see is financial hardship and food poverty within the borough. So there's been various mechanisms in which we've been able to support our local organisations to meet that need for our residents. Fiona, sorry, I was going to try and load it myself. The other key project objective is to carry out a review and evaluation of the successes of the community involvement in the response. And that's something that is still work in progress. We're about to take quite a large consultation with all our town and parish councils and our key COVID groups in the next couple of weeks, but that's taken us a little while to pull together. But the team is going to start that hopefully next week. And also with all the research that we've been doing is to utilise the outcomes of this research to when it comes to supporting our organisations, and that's particularly obviously through our discretionary grant funding. Next slide. I just thought I'd pull out some of the highlights of the data that has been coming out. I mean, we're still waiting for a lot of it. The health data, both from Surrey Heartlands Integrated Care Partnership and North East Hants CCG, is beginning to emerge, and we can start feeding this into the overall data. I have an officer working on this, and hopefully we can pull a bigger presentation or a short document to really summarise all the information. I'm really sorry, there's a fire engine or police car going past. So one key survey that Surrey County Council have undertaken is the Geographic Impact Assessment. And that was to analyse obviously the impact of COVID-19 on our local communities across health and vulnerable dimensions. What was interesting that within the 21 medium super output areas that have been impacted, Waverley came forward on that group, and particularly looking at the Farncombe Binscombe area and also Hindhead area as well. Hindhead, sort of Hazelmere area, the very top of that. So that was sort of quite interesting. That was sort of a new emerging for us in the geographic impact assessment. We've really not kind of pulled that data before out. Fiona, sorry. Oh, if I skip one, Fiona. Oh, yeah, sorry. So looking from the Waverley perspective of the impact of COVID on Waverley, in the geographic impact assessment, you'll be able to see they've cut it into three areas. You've got vulnerable population dimension, health impact dimension, you've got your economic impact dimension. And obviously, say Farncombe is ranked one of the highest. We've got Hindhead, Beacon Hill and Frensham. And obviously we've got Hazelwood, Mere and West Surrey. So I think that was quite interesting to kind of see the areas actually that were emerging, and this is due to the impact of COVID on Waverley. They're going to be doing a deeper dive survey on actually the Hazelmere, Hindhead and Beacon Hill area, where they're going to actually be talking to residents and actually questioning residents to get a better understanding of why that area has come up as one of the top MSOAs, and that was particularly around the health impact. Sorry, Fiona. Post COVID-19, we're beginning to really see some other wider surveys emerging, particularly from the Office of National Statistics. You know, during, I mean, and I think it's some of the things is we think, yes, we most probably know it, but it's actually quite good to now sort of see it as coming out in the data that we need. So one of the keys during lockdown, anxiety levels in older people have increased, and the increase is independent on whether they have a health condition or not. There's a greater anxiety with our older people, older residents. Older residents feel uncomfortable about leaving the home versus the younger age group, and they're tending to only go out, they're tending to mainly go out for essentials rather than kind of meeting friends and going to social places and things. And that means it's going to be more difficult to re-engage them with some of the social activity and wellbeing activities that have been so important to keep them socially connected and ensure that they, you know, mental health and physical health, because that's often where kind of they're picked up if they are mixing with within sort of groups and things. One of the things that is key is coming forward is finances with older people are less likely to be impacted because they have a fixed income through pensions, etc. But another one is older people are more likely to feel that the community should and could and would help them. They're actually much more relaxed that you know that the community will step up and help them. Sorry, Fiona. So this is a little bit of what we're doing to find out. It's really to sort of demonstrate to you how we're trying to look at the data to how it shapes our shaping our direction on how we'll be working with our communities going forward. So we're still a lot of these surveys say they started to come out post the lockdown, so we're still gathering them. Unfortunately, I couldn't get as much of the health data. I mean, some of the key health data is around frailty, particularly frailty with CPOD. Particularly, there is what they're finding is highlighting the carers, and that could be an older carer, a younger carer. That's caused has put a lot of stress and strain, and they're coming out as a cohort of individuals. So again, it's not, you know, just focusing on the older person, but as we that the remainder of this data comes together, we'll be able to sort of pull that into a sort of better document, but it really will help shape the work, particularly of our Ageing Well strategy, potentially the Health and Wellbeing Action Plan, and also it could help shape and look at where we might want to focus in the future, any grant funding or discretionary funding that we have. So this has been useful. It's quite been quite time intensive. And actually, I think what will be really useful is when we get the data back from the town and parish councils, because they really do know how COVID has impacted their community and which residents are most impacted. Fiona, I think there's one more slide. Yeah, so just one more slide to show sort of activity to date that we've been moving forward with our partners with the project. Some of it is within the project board, some of it is actual just work that we would have normally have started to take place. So there's a dissemination of the emergency assistance grant food for food and essential supplies, and we've utilised our community organisations, which has been actually very, very well received by them. And it's gone to the food banks, it's gone to community stores, it's gone to some of the hardship funds that have set up. So they are really in a good place to support the community if there's a lockdown, if they're suffering hardship, individuals and families suffering hardship, if people have to isolate for whatever reason, self-isolate, that will really help them support the community. We're looking at digital inclusion projects, particularly to get not just the older person, but it's also looking at some, really anybody being able to sort of get them digitally included to help address sort of the social isolation. Serval level agreements, obviously we've looked at them, particularly the second chart, supporting organisations who delivered services through lockdown. We're looking, part of a health management programme with Surrey Heartlands Integrated Care Partnership, looking at services and activity for carers in Waverley, because they have been disproportionately affected and impacted through COVID. And that's some of it because they took their loved ones out of the care homes and looked after them solely on their own for the 12 weeks, and actually that has started to attribute to their decline in their physical and mental health. Falls prevention, it was a face-to-face programme, it's now become a digital programme. There's a video that is due to go out. We're also looking at promoting and supporting initiatives to address social isolation, particularly with a project called Reconnections, which again is delivered through the Surrey Heartlands Integrated Care Partnership. And we started to work with supporting the Waverley Centres for older people to reopen. And we're really pleased that actually Rowley's had a tea cake afternoon and had 16 people attend. We've had the Clock House starting to do a tea and cake once a week. I think that started this week. We've had again the same with Farncombe Day Centre. So it's really great that we're starting to see them re-emerge, and Hazelway have started, actually they started to deliver services and reopen on the 4th of July. So, they're quite moved quite forward with it. So yeah, that's kind of where we are with the programme to date. I'd say I'm hoping that sort of come end of September, we'll have all the data, and then that's when we can really start shaping and bringing back to this committee maybe the sort of work that we could be focusing on and areas that we could focus on. All questions to Andrew, please.
Okay, thank you, Katie, for that presentation. I think it's important people understand the work that we're doing and the potential for the future. And I know we'll be talking in a minute about recovery. I think it would be good to continue this dialogue, as you said, in this meeting. Obviously not expecting a presentation at every meeting, but I would like it to be on the next meeting, just for like a top up, an update on where we are. But also I think some of the issues could be very important that we tackle, we take on as individual bits of work to support it. So I think it's a really, really important bit of work. So I'll open it up. I've got Councillor Else has got a hand up first.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, a really good piece of work. There's a lot of work gone into this, I can tell. So thank you very much for that. Can I ask you, please, what is MSA OAs? You might have said that already, but I missed it if you did.
multiple super output areas.
Start again, sorry.
Multiple super output areas or medium super output areas. Multiple, I think it is.
All right. It's our invention or somebody else's?
No, it's a statistic we use. These are our output areas where there are significant issues, and they're measured through various different statistics, social economic health.
Sorry, Katie, but led by who? I can't quite understand that.
They're a national, the super output areas, yeah.
That's good. Can I go to my question now? Because I just needed to understand that. Oh, it's not a question, it's a statement. I would just say that in your on your post-COVID slide, the thing that grabbed me was that you said 70% of older people, or 40% or something percentage of over 70s, sorry, that's where the 70 bit came in, were nervous about going out. And I don't know how much weight you need to put on that at the moment, because there isn't anywhere for them to go. Their normal social, a lot of over 70s normal social activity would be in places that they can't go to anymore. They, you know, so I just wanted to say that. I think you would expect to see that, wouldn't you?
This is around also, though, your normal healthy 70-year-old who might go tennis or might go bowling. You know, it's not necessarily associated to your over 70. This is what they're finding. This is whereas there had been the sort of 69 plus age group were much more relaxed, much more actually, you know, not as risk averse. Actually, they've naturally stepped back. So normal activities that they would have done, which wouldn't necessarily be going to a day centre or anything else, it would be, that's where they are becoming, they're more, you know, likely to stay in, and they're seeing a high proportion. So actually it does affect quite a few.
But have they been able to do that? Because, you know, they were in lockdown for quite some time, and those activities weren't available to them, were they? That's the point I was making.
During lockdown, absolutely, but it's coming out of lockdown. So I kind of, if I sort of take like my mother who locked down, but now she's playing tennis again, now she's part of her walking group again, now she's swimming because she lives near the sea, you know, so the things that she would have done within the group set she has, she's gone back out and started to do, whereas other sort of, you know, healthy 69 plus year olds are actually not going out as much as they used to, and are more reserved and more, you know, maybe, you know, you could use the word scared to go out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got a number of hands up. The next one, I'll do it in the order they've come up. I've got Councillor Rabini, then Councillor Dixon, then Councillor Hyman. So Councillor Rabini.
Thank you, Chairman. I was somewhat shocked to see that Hazelmere and Hindhead come very near the top in every category, right across that slide you show. I don't know the answer because I didn't know we had that much of a problem. I do now. What I'd like to say, Katie, is can we work quite closely with the work you're doing there? Obviously, I know you've been in the area, Hazeway, etc., etc. However, what I would like to do, obviously, is to get some knowledge of what's happening so that we can bring this down. I really don't want our area to be in the top of those charts because obviously it is quite significant for the health of the local population. So perhaps any work you do down here or anything, suggestions, perhaps we can assist you in trying to drive this down, please.
So absolutely, this research that's happening is being led by Surrey County Council, and they're going to do, say, a actual sort of, I loathe the words, deep dive, particularly into that area. We can certainly speak to Surrey to find out the questions that they're going to be asking, how they're going to go about it, and actually, is it something that that you know, as a councillor, you can be part of. But that information is going to come back, any results of that, back into our project group. That's been agreed, so we will get an understanding. I think some of the understanding I get is it's through care homes in the area, and that's was one of the reasons. But we'll get that information once they've done their deep dive.
I love that saying. And obviously, once we get that information, I think we'd be all interested to know, for example, why is Hazelmere so highly ranked? And that's why I think continuous updates would be really good so we can understand it. Councillor Sally Dixon.
Yeah, I was just coming back to the same thing because I noticed that I'm Hale and Heath End, obviously, and Farnham Hale seems to have made the shortlist as well, which I'm quite sort of surprised about. Now, can I just understand two things? The table which you showed, was that like the top 5 in Waverley, and then there's like a top Surrey as well? And what actually was Hale? What was Hale done that's got itself onto the into the spotlight? I mean, I'm a bit, yeah.
This is say through the impact of COVID, through the lockdown. So that's why, and it's how those residents have been more significantly impacted than others. And it's brought through social care and health data, pulling it together. So that's why they're going out and doing this. Once they've done their geographical impact assessment, now they've got the sort of highlighted areas. And
yeah, it doesn't make sense to me because I live right in the middle of Hale, and actually everybody I know, maybe it's just everybody I know, is been working flat out through the nobody's lost their jobs, nobody's been furloughed because everyone's just all city workers and stuff like that. The majority of people who have here are on that category, so they're all working from home on their laptops. So I can't see why we've started to, unless you're just talking about specific estates like the Sandy Hill estate or some of the other estates.
It's a smaller specific estates. I can't see oh yeah, Farnham Upper Hale. So that will be economic impact dimension. So that will be certainly around how the economic impact, and actually that could be the high street. So I think I had an email yesterday from one of the team about interviewing us for the economic impact, which I need to link with Katherine about, but that could be around the impact of the economy, and it could be around actually the town centre.
Well, there isn't a town, there's only like 2 corner shops. There's a mini Tesco and a mini Co-op and about 3 chip shops. I mean, we haven't got, this is again, we haven't got a high street in Hale Village.
No, you're right. So I'll go back to say Christine and just find out exactly what they need to know. But it could be just a very small area like the Sandy Hill area.
Okay, if you can feed that back to Councillor Dixon, I'm sure that'd be really useful.
Yeah,
for that understanding.
Yeah.
Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll turn my video off in case you're having, I seem to have signal problems, but I think other people do too. So this evening, I think we're all beset a little bit, but it might make the signal better. Thanks to Councillor Else for asking what MSOAs are. Save me worrying about that. And I still don't know what it is. Well, I suppose it's multiple super output areas, but that leaves me none the wiser. And if they're national areas, I actually thought that when we're getting information, which I see on a lot of government websites, these appear to be CCG zones. They're certainly not wards, so I don't think we should confuse them with us, but it would be very nice if we as ward councillors were told that there were significant problems in our ward. As Councillor Dixon has said, Upper Hale certainly doesn't have a high street. It's got an E on the end of it as well, Hale has. And we've got town centre, we've got Webburn and Badshot Lee figuring the worst of all in one of these indicators. And I'm just wondering, I've gone again, have I? Because everybody else is moving on my screen and I can't see why I would.
I can still hear you, Councillor Hyman.
Yeah, I think there's a few people with problems because I can see movement on my screen, which I assume means I'm online. Yeah, I think what we need to do is, can we ask, please, can ward councillors and members be made aware of this information? To me, it's meaningless at the moment. Can we have those slides so that we know what it is? I mean, I don't want to put onto Facebook or something that, you know, these particular areas have got problems, so be really careful, when that might be a complete misrepresentation of what the situation is. Upper Hale doesn't have any care homes, so it can't ward. Upper Hale Ward doesn't have any care homes. The town centre probably includes Castle Ward and possibly Moor Park, which means it could have a number of care homes, and it could have, of course, the Chantry's estate in it. So this is completely meaningless information to us and would worry people unnecessarily, possibly. So I think the whole point here really is that recovery, as far as I'm concerned, and most people, depends upon confidence, business confidence, and people's confidence in being able to go and conduct their lives normally. That comes from having reliable information and data. And I don't think we're getting that anywhere. People, it seems nationally, there's a concern that we're descending into no integrity, no accountability, no information can be trusted whatsoever. And we really don't want that to be felt about Waverley as well. I mean, who would want to start their own business in a situation where we are, where we're not told whether there's 50 outbreaks of COVID, 50 negative, positive tests in our local area, or none? We have absolutely no idea.
So I'm not sure if we're getting to a question to Katie.
Can we have data? Can we get data so that we can tell our reliable data that we can give to our residents, so that they know whether they need to be careful or not this week and next week, or whether, you know, medium and long term as well. Because at the moment, I don't think anybody knows what's going on. And I think that is what means people have no confidence that they can go out safely. And businesses can have no confidence as to whether they can trade and whether they need to invest. They will not invest in the circumstances we're in at the moment. It's all about confidence. It's all about data.
Jerry, I think what Katie's presented, I think, you know, we weren't intending to get of how many cases we got of COVID, what would make businesses, that's not what we're here for today. But I think the question I hear from that is, can some of that presentation be distilled to, that's a good word, distilled down to councillors to give them a better understanding for issues in their ward? I think all the other things, it's a county council, it's a, you know, the Strategic Resilience Forum, the stuff that the Chief Exec sits on. I don't want to sort of burden you, Katie, with that. But if you can get that presentation where you've got areas where it's highlighted a concern, maybe you can email the ward members with any information. So it's just relating to what you can give rather than the bigger picture.
Absolutely, and to be honest, a lot of this information is only just emerging, so it's a bit hot off the press to yourselves. So as we get more information, we can distill it even more as they do their interviewing and questioning of the particular cohorts, and we can get to understand what the actual issues are, you know, but that are coming through. But this is a lot of this is coming through from Surrey County Council, and it'll be through their adult social care teams, it will be through their children's teams, through the information they're asking their clients. It's coming through health, through the health organisation, so they'll be pulling it. Kelvin was in the meeting this morning, really interesting how they're pulling that data from actually GP records. So actually some of this is data that's being pulled together, and I think for my part, it's the first time actually that a lot of this has been shared between us all, and as we can get to understand it better, I think it will actually really benefit that we can shape some of the work we do around local areas and around the cohorts of individuals who need it most. So I think it can be much more focused. But certainly, I mean, absolutely, as I get in, I will send it through.
Thank
and
you.
Thanks. Chairman.
I'll try to simplify what comes through, but obviously comes in with some a health warning of, as I said today to our health colleagues, I don't always understand the language. So again, that obviously that's what's happened here this evening as well. So I completely get that.
Chairman, if I may ask a specific question, but also in respect of the officer report that's in front of us, because I've covered the wider issue. It's getting good information so that we can have confidence. That's the point. And whoever it comes from, we need it. You know, whoever's job.
Sorry, Jerry, are you talking about agenda item report 9?
I'm on page 21 and the bullet points in the middle of it, Chairman. Is that applicable at this time?
No, you've jumped ahead one agenda item.
Oh, have I?
We're still on agenda item 8, which is the resilience. which is, and then in a minute we will turn to agenda item 9, which is the recovery side. So if you can hold that thought and that question.
My apologies, I haven't got any agenda papers for item 8 then, have I?
There isn't. That's why it was done as a presentation, and Katie's attended tonight because the information was that hot off the press.
My apologies, I've mixed the two up because there's 2 items on this. Carry on.
Exactly. One's resilience, one's recovery. So if I can move on, hold your question for the next item. Councillor Hegan, thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Katie. I found that presentation really fascinating, but a bit too fast moving. Would you be able to circulate the slides, accepting that they are very rough pulled together, but I still think it's a great insight into issues.
Yeah, absolutely. They can be sent through.
We'll send them out with the papers. Thank you for that. Andrew, did you want to raise any other issues?
No, just to say, Chairman, and to the committee, that I think it's realised this is a work in progress, and Katie prepared the presentation for you at the last minute, having sort of come out of a meeting today, so that she could give the committee the most up-to-date information we've got. So yes, we will be coming back to you as this work stream unfolds, and then the final report, of course, I think will be extremely illuminating. The other thing to notice is really sort of just to highlight the way that the project is shaped is that we are about, and I think that's already been mentioned, but to emphasise, we're speaking to the parish councils, to the town councils now, because it's only those that are really on the ground that can feed back the need as they see it in their villages, in their towns, in their streets. So as well as getting all of the statistics from county and the ICPs and everything else, we are trying to speak to local people on the ground so that they can give us extremely important feedback on how they see the needs of their vulnerable residents. So it is a big project, but we're trying to go to micro and macro so we get the very, very best picture possible, so we can formulate the report and then how we support our communities going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And yes, Katie, it's a brilliant presentation in such short notice. I've got a couple of more speakers, then we will move on. I've got Councillor Dixon and Councillor Else.
Yeah, I think it is a good presentation. That'd be good to see the slides. Thank you, Katie. I think it would be good to have more information. The only thing I've heard anecdotally in my neighbourhood is that there is one of our nursing homes where there was a lot of COVID death. I don't know, one of our neighbours is a funeral director, and he told me that he'd been to this particular home a lot of times. Now, I wasn't even sure that was in Hale or that what he was telling me was true, but obviously some of these statistics, if we can understand what's behind the numbers, then we can try and understand what's happening in our areas.
And it's as simple as that's why that's flagged that up as an area. But I'd say hopefully, you know, as they're bringing this community impact assessment together, we can actually that we can share that document. But I'll ask somebody to make it as user friendly as possible.
Thank you.
And I think we've got to accept that we're not going to get all the answers to our questions straight away. It's going to take time, and they're going to drip feed in. So I think we have to accept that. Councillor Else, if you want the last speaking slot.
Thank you. Just a quick one. It hadn't escaped my notice that Elstead was on one of the trouble spots. I wasn't going to bring it up tonight. I'm not going to. I'm happy to take that offline, but I will be taking that offline with you. But to Andrew's point about talking to the people on the ground, please, please, please don't forget to speak to the ward councillors as well. We do often get left out. You go, not you, but things do go to, not you, I'm not saying it to you personally, but things do go to parish council sometimes and to town council, and the ward council, if you're not on the parish council, does get left out sometimes, and we do know an awful lot about what's going on our patches. So just a reminder to make sure you include us. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Katie, thank you for your hard work in getting this before us. I appreciate that. If we can move on to agenda item 9, which is the economic recovery section, that should be pages 19 to 24. And before, I don't know whether Zach's going to open this, but can I just ask Zach, there's a couple of a FAME business database and a CRM system, which means absolutely nothing to me. I couldn't see in a document. It's just really useful if you're going to use acronyms, or you actually know what they are. But Zach, the floor's yours.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be very quick because I'm going to introduce the Economic Development Manager, Katherine Knight, who will, I'm sure she'll tell you what FAME and CRM both stand for. I don't know what FAME stands for myself, so I'll be interested to find out. So over to Katherine. Thank you.
Hi. On those two acronyms, FAME is actually the name of a database system. I don't know if you've heard of Mint. You used to be able to get through the local library system, and it pulls together about 17 different sources of data on businesses, from companies house to insolvency companies, and so it's updated every 24 hours. And we were looking to get access to that. We've had free access for 3 months during COVID. And so from that, we've got about 1,500 email addresses for our business newsletter, which has been really useful. And we can also look at the sectors in each area and within the borough. On CRM, it's customer relationship management, so sort of key account management, and again, tying into the database of all the businesses to try and get a handle on what we've got in the area, and communicate with those businesses.
Good. That makes some sense to me now. Thank you for that.
Can I just ask which CRM you're going for? Because I know quite a lot about CRMs actually.
So with Hampshire County Council, Surrey County Council, and the EM3 Local Enterprise Partnership, they've bought into Tractivity. So we've had access to that for about the last 12 months, and that ties in with the FAME database now. There are some costs involved for FAME, which is something we'll be looking to put a business case towards.
Great, thank you.
Okay, anything, any other information from the report you want to highlight, Katherine?
So I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at it, but there were 8 key objectives in the economic recovery project. First of all, to say, right from the outset in the crisis mode, we were having lots of calls initially from Hazelmere, where some of the first cases arose, and then building on that, we were talking to our key partners across Surrey and across the EM3 area every 2 or 3 days to find out what was going on, talking to local businesses, and then as the government provided more support, including the business grant support, we were directing businesses to that where eligible, and working with business rates team on that. So really in the crisis, it was signposting information, trying to get financial support for local businesses. We've got lots of small businesses in this area, and so it's important we found out from the larger businesses and the smaller businesses. We've met with the Chambers of Commerce every 3 weeks. We've met with the town clerks, the 4 main settlements, every 3 weeks. We've started up a business task group so that we get people from all the different sectors to come and talk about their experiences. There's a company in Godalming Hotel Plan, for example, they had to return £22 million worth of holiday refunds. So they're actually leaving the borough. And then you've got IT companies that have actually benefited from the number of people working from home. And this area as a whole has the advantage of having people who have been working from home. We've done a number of business surveys, and that has been shown. The FSB, Federation of Small Businesses, have carried those out as well, and Surrey Chamber of Commerce. About 30% of businesses said they probably wouldn't be able to survive. And so it's working with those businesses, seeing how we can support them, some who've gone through the net. So we've worked out a internal and external SWOT analysis of economic development and the economy in Waverley, and that has provided a foundation. We're working towards a short-term action plan for the next 12 months. So that will be looking at supporting and protecting the businesses we've got in this area, trying to attract some of the businesses that are obviously don't need larger spaces now. There's also flexible working space. We've seen a couple of those, one open in Cranley this month, the one in Godalming is doing really well at the moment as people are working from home but don't want to stay at home. And as mentioned in the PowerPoint slides I sent through, a number of people are they have been made redundant, are losing their jobs. So how can we encourage them to either start their own business? We've got a business support service, Enterprise First, that we work on our behalf and have worked with for the last 10 years. They're repackaging what the offer is, and so trying to encourage people to start their own business. Obviously, that's better for their well-being than not working. And so we've got online support there. We've got telephone support, one-to-one support, mentoring support. So really looking at that. Again, I think one of the questions that rose in Katie's presentation was about the economic well-being. So there's been a massive increase in the number of people claiming universal credit. That could be directors of companies that have suddenly had no work for 6 months, or it could be other people, but a number of those are in employment. So that's gone from about 500 to about 4,000 or 5,000 now in Waverley. So significant increase. And after the furlough scheme finishes at the end of October, especially in hospitality and leisure, that will increase. So we're working with DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, with Waverley Training Services, I think on slides I mentioned what we were doing to support people who had lost their jobs. So we've always supported Farnham Job Club, which is run by volunteers in Guildford, but it's held in the Sandy Hill area in Farnham and also Central Farnham. We've been working with Godalming Rotary Club, and they're working with, I know, Katie's team and the CAB on providing a hardship fund. So people who request that fund will also be supported to try and find employment, and they've got some real experts there, some people from Heathrow high up in HR to help people. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of career collateral who've lost their jobs. So in their 50s, that's one of the high areas of people who've lost their jobs. So how can we encourage them to perhaps change sector? I don't know if you've heard of the film industry is trying to get people from the aviation industry to work with them, and also the aviation industry working into the NHS and primary care like that because of their skills. What else? As I said, we're working really closely with our partners, with the chambers, with other providers, with the LET on. I think today there was a tourism grant that was available, and I think it had gone in 15 minutes. So, you know, people are having a really tight time, and I spoke to somebody yesterday who was involved in London transitioning, and, you know, and seeing how we can learn from other areas about how to reopen high streets. I suppose one thing I should mention is the government provided 111,000 to Waverley potentially to reopen high streets. So we've had another colleague join our team to administer that. It's European funding. Lots of stipulations and requirements, and so we're working to try and access that money to then provide it to the towns and villages who've applied.
Okay.
Sorry, there's a lot of information.
I know it's a lot of information, so I'll give you a break and see if anybody. I've got Yasmin who's put a hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. It was a point on behalf of Councillor Mirrlees, who, Katherine, you may have worked with Faye. I think it was Kelvin's team, the sort of event side of Kelvin's team. Councillor Mirrlees is very interested in the whole idea of the Waverley film. So obviously Waverley's been used a few times as sort of the backdrop of certain films and programmes and whatever. So Councillor Mirrlees was interested in understanding if that's something that could be pursued, and whether that was sort of on the economic development side. Obviously that would be for the local economy.
Did you see the film map? Yeah.
Sorry. So is there something?
So we launched an online film map.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. Yeah, we launched an online film map with different locations during lockdown, and we presented it as something you can refer to from your own city and look at these other films. But we are looking to get it printed. I know one of the areas that we're keen to support is the visitor economy, but there's been an issue with visitor management at Frensham Ponds. So can we try and encourage people to go elsewhere in the borough? But I'll send you a link. I can send a link to that film map if you're not aware. And I would encourage everybody, if they're not already signed up to the business newsletter, because we've been doing that every week throughout the COVID crisis. It's now about every 2 weeks with lots of signposting and ideas. We've had some films on reopening the high streets to try and allay people's fears. And so to encourage people back to shop locally, whether that's an accountant, a retailer, or just support their local environment.
Okay, brilliant. All right, open it up for any other questions. I think, Katherine, you've been saved on this one. I think it's some excellent bit of work. I mean, any point I had was the economic action plan. I know economic can be economic, like the health and the economy and lots of stuff, is how that's scrutinised and who takes that role. But I'm sure that's a conversation Zach will have with the executive, just where the action plan sits and who actually scrutinises it, or is it a plan that actually several O&Ss might have interest in? I don't want to complicate it, but I'll be grateful if Zach, if you can give that some thought for the future. Any other questions? Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. I just am interested to know how you have engaged with the villages. I can understand that you have been in conversation with the towns and with Cranley, and of course with the well, the businesses that are obviously there. But I just wondered how you'd engage with the villages.
So we have we send out the business newsletter separately to all of the towns and parishes. And where, for example, the larger high street areas like Bramley, Milford, Farncombe, we do vacancy rates. So we've been going out this week looking at vacancy rates, and we'll feed that back to those villages or towns where relevant. In terms of the reopening the high street fund, the 111,000 was available to all of the retail areas in Waverley. And so we approached all of them and said, would you like to access this fund? There are lots of requirements behind the scenes, and there is a risk in accessing the money. But if you would like to go ahead with that, you can. So we have contacted everybody to see if they would be interested in trying to access some of that money. Some of it, which we hope will pay for the famed database ourselves. But things like footfall counters, we're looking to get those in the high streets paid for, various different activities. The posters that we produced for all shops and businesses online, you know, we've provided those free of charge for anybody to print. So bits and pieces like that. I know Tanshire Park, we've been to since the lockdown, the business park in Elsted, and spoken to some business there.
Okay, Katherine, thank you very much for that. I don't see any other hands, so thank you for your time tonight and for presenting to that. Did I just see a hand go up? Yeah, Councillor Hyman, I saw your hand.
Sorry, I thought I'd done the hands up on the system there. Yes, as I said, I did want to speak on the middle of page 21. Are we on the right item?
You are. Let's go ahead with your question.
Okay. Well, specifically in relation to the funding which has been talked about, which comes through the ERDF, the European Regional Development Fund. It says there's 111,000, and it says on the 5th of the bullet points there, Farnham Town Council, and lists various expenditure and social distancing planters. I would imagine that would be referring to the COVID road system that's been put in place. And I thought that the government, our government, had said that councils would all be reimbursed to either fully or to 90% or something of their expenditure. And I appear to be hearing here that we've got a bid in and we don't know, and there's lots of hoops to jump through. So I'm wondering what it is, and whether I'm right that this is about the town council's expenditure, whether Waverley will cover the town council if the ERDF or the government doesn't come up with it. You know, where exactly we stand on that, and you know, obviously whether or not we actually want planters in the road as the best way to encourage people to come into Farnham in order to shop and make our businesses viable. try to get back towards the old normal. There are a number of issues here, but so that's a specific issue. But I mean, I don't know why other people aren't concerned about having been told that universal credit claims are up from 500 to 4,000 or 5,000, and this is before furlough payments are ending. You know, it appears to me that we've got a horrendous situation here, which I warned people about back in our first meeting in April or whatever it was, but it was ignored, that we need to take action. If Surrey and central government aren't doing the job of providing information that can give people confidence, they need to know what risk they're taking. That's where confidence comes from. You've got to know what the risks are. How are businesses expected to start up, new businesses, if they don't know what the risks are of them being another spike and immediately throwing away all their, you know, money they're borrowing off their mortgage or whatever and investing in a new business? You know, if that's all going to go down the pan, then people aren't going to start a new business. Perhaps in IT, it might be worth it if they've got nothing better to do or something they can try, but there's a lot of competition building there. We really do need to know what are the risks that our residents are facing, whether they should be going into town or not. The people who we heard in the last item are elderly and are worried about going out. We need to build their confidence, and we need data and information. And if we're not getting it from central government and SCC, we need it from Waverley. And that means, even though it's not necessarily in our remit, hey, we need to get the march on all the other areas in the country, because I'm sure they don't know what's going on either. We need data, we need information on where the problems are, so that our residents know whether we've got a problem compared to other areas. It seems we do have, where we've always been led to believe that we're lucky here. So, Chairman, you know, can we please take, you know, make sure we take responsibility for our residents? Because if we're saying we're doing so, we're doing all this stuff for them, let's be really doing what they need. You know, I know we've got care homes, and we've got our sheltered accommodation. We've got our elderly people's centres, which are good things that we do for the community, and we can do our very utmost with those. But let's go as far as we can to sort this borough out, because solving this problem starts at home, surely. Thank you.
I mean, obviously the government have been quite clear about what social distancing and people going to shops and having to wear masks in shops. I don't think that's a subject we should be going into tonight. I think one of your questions was about Waverley reimbursing Farnham Town Council. I'm sure Tom has a view on that. If he wishes, I'm happy for him to give a comment on that. And then we'll come maybe back to then, Katherine, to any other bits from that question that you can pick up. So, Tom, would you like to say anything about that?
Thank you, Chair. So the council has set aside a sum to reimburse an element of costs to parish councils. I think £80,000 was put aside for that, and that process is being worked through, and we're talking to parish and town councils about that. Obviously, it varies quite a bit in terms of different areas and in terms of what parish and town councils themselves committed to in terms of costs. I would also just want to make clear that although early on in the COVID pandemic crisis, the government did make various assurances about how much councils would be reimbursed. Clearly, as we've reported to full council over the last couple of months, that money hasn't been forthcoming. And in fact, although some element was very welcome to us, it won't cover all of our costs at all. We have now been invited alongside every other council to make a claim to government for other costs. So we don't yet know the outcome of that. Behind it all, there is, of course, an algorithm. Exactly how that will play out remains to be seen. So we will be putting our claim in. We'll be doing that on a monthly basis, and we'll be making full reports to full council and to the relevant scrutiny committees as we do that.
Great, thank you, Tom. Katherine, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
I was only going to say, on the reopening High Streets Fund, and I think Farnham, we divided it by the size of the settlements, and the villages had some money. Farnham had about £40,000 they could apply for, and they've bid for more in case they don't get some of it, but we won't be able to provide that money if the government don't pay it back to us. The legal team are looking at SLAs with the town councils for this, and we've made them very aware of the risks. For example, planters, they weren't allowed, they might be allowed. we're on the 5th or 6th version of what is allowed within that fund. So we are working closely with them on that, but it's not as straightforward as it.
Okay, well, these things are never straightforward. So thank you for that, and thank you to the Chief Exec for the update, and I'm sure we'll look forward to further updates in full council. I think that's everything. So thank you very much, Katherine, for your time on that. There is one recommendation, which is members note progress made and comment on future activities and priorities. I think we've raised some issues, and hopefully that information will come over the next weeks or months. So is everybody happy to move on to agenda item 10? Just looking at the screens. Okay, thank you very much. Kelvin.
Thank you, Chair. And as is the way this evening, as Head of Service, I won't be introducing this report. Tamsin McLeod is with us, the Leisure Services Manager, who's going to introduce it. I'm here, obviously, to answer any questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So the supporting report provides a full update on the 3 leisure investments, which has now gone to executive and been approved. But just to summarise the current position, which is that Farnham and Godalming projects have currently been deferred, with the exception of gaining Secretary of State approval for the disposal of school land for the Godalming site, so that we can hopefully proceed with that at such time. And we've also received approval for Cranley to progress with further the pre-tender work, which includes further consultation, and because of the significant impact of COVID, a review of the facility mix. So that's where we stand with the leisure investments. Just to give you a brief update on the leisure centres themselves, because obviously I'm really pleased to see that, confirm that we opened 4 weeks ago, and a huge amount of work has gone into opening the leisure centres safely to make sure that the customers feel confident in coming back to the facilities. And the usage figures and the customer feedback has been really positive so far. We've received a huge amount of positive comments, which is really lovely to see after the amount of work that's gone into opening them. And everything from people feeling that it's safe, that it's well organised, that their children have really enjoyed coming back to their swimming lessons, and that people are just enjoying getting back to some sense of normality with their exercise and health and well-being, which is fantastic.
Okay, well, I've just got one, I suppose, more of an observation, which I think is an important one, which is under your point 4.9, saying the cost to the council for Cranley, just keeping it safe and workable, is 6 million over the next 5 years. You know, that's throwing good money after a bad thing. So I think that was very, very a useful reminder of the necessity of that. I'll open it up first before we come to anything else. So a load of hands going up. So again, in the order they've on my screen is Councillor Joan Hegan.
Hello, yes, thank you, Tamsin. Are you able to give any sort of feel as to the percentage of pre-COVID levels of usage we're getting in the leisure centres? I mean, is it 50% or more or less? I just can't visualise the impact of the measures that have been implemented on the level of resource that's available.
Yes, this is one area that we're monitoring really closely. Obviously, we've only been open 4 weeks, so it's very, very early days. And the first 2 weeks of those were summer holidays, and so children were still off school and people were away, albeit mostly in this country. So it hasn't given us a true reflection yet. What we're waiting for really is the September figures that will come through in early October, which will give us a really true reflection of probably where the usage will sit for the next few months. But as it stands, we're monitoring it really closely. We're getting weekly usage figures from the leisure centres, and what we will be doing moving forwards is that comparing that to actuals compared to last year, but also against their forecast for the recovery period. So it varies. We've got 5 sites and each site has different facility mix, but the sort of percentages average between 50 and 70% for most activities. And they're really focusing on the core activities for the moment. So we're in a really positive position with all the gyms, the swimming pools, classes, and now swimming lessons open. And the feedback has been really positive. It's booked sessions only, so people know when they're going and where they stand, and the numbers are very limited to make sure that we can maintain social distancing with cleaning in between sessions for every session. So there is definitely room to reflect on the numbers and revise the programmes, which is what we intend to do with Places Leisure as the weeks progress. But for the moment, we're really pleased with the positive feedback that we're getting, and that people just feel safe coming back to the centres and enjoying the facilities and the feeling of the centres.
Okay, thank you for that. Got quite a few names up, so there's a bit of a list. So Councillor Rubini's next, and then Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 things I'd like to ask. First of all, under 5.2 on page 28, provision of quality leisure facilities in Farnham, Godalming and Cranley, and they talk about encouraging affordable access to sports and leisure facilities and the arts for all, improve leisure services across the borough, focusing on health inequalities in the borough and seeking to ensure that no area is disadvantaged, and improve facilities for young people. As we've already heard, Havesmere unfortunately seems to be becoming the top of the wrong grass in that MSOA thing and 1 or 2 others. The business was also mentioned, and yet we're not mentioned here on the positive ones. Now, I know that we have been told that there is a refurbishment coming up in the future, and I think about 5 or 6 years' time for the leisure centre. However, how can we say that it's going to, no area is disadvantaged and improve facilities for young people if Havesmere is not inclusive? My second question is under 6.4, which is the closure of the creche. I've seen no figures on it, and I'm very inquisitive to find out why it hasn't succeeded. Is it the decoration? Is it in fact the number of people that use the actual facility itself? I don't see anything to support why it's closing, and I'd be interested to what the background data is. Those are 2 questions. Thank you.
Tamsin or Kelvin or?
Well, I'd happily take the question regarding Havesmere. Certainly, Councillor Rubini, there's no intention to leave Havesmere off. This was purely a report on this round of investment, which actually in this phase looked at Farnham, Godalming and Cranley specifically. Obviously, Havesmere had just had the most recent investment prior to this. So this report was merely looking at the 3 investment schemes that were agreed in 2018. So apologies if that gave a misleading thing that we were missing out Havesmere. That certainly isn't the case. It just wasn't part of this specific report. Tamsin may be on the line now, but we can certainly, with regard to creches, it's really a change in habit from people that use the facilities. In essence, what they've found is that many more people in the area have their own childcare facilities, namely nannies or nurseries, and weren't using the creche for the 2 to 3 hours it was opening. It's always something that we'll continue review, and that's be a part of an ongoing process as we enter out of this COVID emergency. And if I had one opportunity, Chair, I'd just like to come back on Councillor Hegan's question about pre-COVID numbers. We must remember that all the percentage figures we're talking about now with regard to 50 to 70% usage, that is against a new operational model which has limited the numbers that can obviously enter and use the facilities. So when we talk about 50%, that's against the new sort of way of working, not pre-COVID. We are quite a long way off the numbers of usage compared to pre-COVID. So I just wanted to clarify that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, obviously, it's disappointing that Farnham Leisure Centre's improvements are going to be put on hold and not proceed. But we were really looking forward to having a new climbing wall. I think possibly residents might say that if the council's going to drive us up the wall, they might happily provide us with a wall to climb up. But obviously, I couldn't possibly comment on that myself. My real issue here is in relation to number 4. In the agenda paper, Cranley Leisure Centre. First of all, 4.1 talks about identifying the preferred location for a new Cranley Leisure Centre. I think I probably heard at a meeting somewhere that the preferred option was going to be in the centre of the car park, and that I'm pleased to see is confirmed in writing here. So that is the preferred option at 4.5. It says that on page 27. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing to residents, but I do know that it would be jolly nice to give Cranley's residents some hope. They deserve some hope. The place has been like Farnham. It's been snarled up completely with Barhatch Lane closed and the High Street. I mean, absolute havoc over there. And it would be nice to give them some good news so that they know that everything they've been going through is going to be worthwhile. They'll get something out of it. But I'm really concerned. The last bit on 4.3 says it's expected that the revenue assumptions made will now need to be revisited. I assume that that is a caveat to what's at 4.5, the amount of time. So this is something that isn't necessarily going to be thought about for a while, and then we're talking 3 or 4 years, obviously, for the process once it gets the go ahead. And I'm just wondering, is there real hope here, or what is the situation? Are we dependent on, hey, I mean, if Waverley doesn't exist, are we going to be reliant upon Surrey County Council loving the folks of Cranley in future, or is there some real hope here? I'd just like to know realistically. It's nice to say this is what the plans are, but this is all dependent upon, and I think Cranley would probably like to know how realistic this might be. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. And that's one of the main reasons as a committee we've had this as a main recurring item at every single meeting, so it doesn't fall off the end of the cliff and we lose control of it. Kelvin, do you want to just come back on that question?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Hyman and Chair. Hope. Yeah, I think this does give hope. I think what this report states really is the do nothing option is not an option. If we want to have health and leisure facilities in Cranley, we need to continue with the project to ensure that we create a new facilities fit for the future. So this is certainly hope, but we have to caveat it at this time because post-COVID, who knows what the leisure market will be like. But given the timescales involved in the pre-tender work, the pre-construction element, I think that gives us a long enough lead in to know and be able to establish a sustainable business model in the future. But there is obviously the risk that we do not know how the leisure industry will recover from the COVID pandemic. But this does give hope because we are continuing with that project, but we will be really looking at the facility mix in light of the pandemic and see how that impacts it. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you for that. We will keep you on your toes on this one, I can assure you. I've got Councillor Else and then Councillor Foraszewski.
Thank you, Chairman. It was always my wish to have a climbing wall at Farnham, and it's very disappointing that we won't be getting one. Is it a fact that the specialist operator has actually, I mean, forever, has now said it won't be available to us because there's one in Alton and Fleet? Because I find that a little bit strange. Alton and Fleet, I think, is probably far enough away from Farnham. There's a lot of need there. That's one question. Please, if I may ask another one. So it's disappointing that Surrey County Council have finally decided that the piece of land that we wanted to acquire from them, lease from them, is actually a playing field. It's only taken them 2 or 3 years to make that decision. And I know that we were working quite hard to get an answer out of them. I think that's pretty disgraceful, actually, on the part of Surrey County Council. However, is the extra car parking now still required due to the drop in use at the Godalming Leisure Centre? And if it is, and we're going to go for it, and we're going to get onto the Secretary of State and try and get the lease, who pays for the consultation that's necessary? Is it us? Is it PFP? Is it county? Who is it? Thank you very much.
Kelvin, if we can have some succinct answers.
Yep, I'll do my best. With regard to Farnham and the climbing facility, in essence, what we were looking at was a climbing facility based around a franchise called Clip and Climb that had been used extensively by Places Leisure elsewhere, and was what their business case was based upon. And unfortunately, yes, we were informed by the Clip and Climb operators that as Alton and Farnborough had opened, that they felt it was too much to have another climbing facility in Farnham, and it would basically dilute the usage across those 3 sites and make them less successful. So that was the feedback. We chased extremely hard to challenge that, but they refused to budge. With regard to the playing fields at Godalming, we feel there is very limited cost in continuing with our Secretary of State application. We've already carried out the consultation. We feel that it's worthwhile proceeding with that element. In the future, we then will be able to, as COVID hopefully succeeds and we will move forward with a leisure industry that works, that we will have the opportunity then to extend Godalming Leisure Centre. Anything we do at Godalming, if we wish to, will require increased car parking. So it's worthwhile continuing, but we will reassess when we retender the contract in 2023 whether there is still a worthwhile business case to invest in Godalming.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move this on. Sorry, because we've got other speakers and we've still got agenda items. Councillor Forrest-Esky, you've been waiting very patiently to speak as a Cranley ward member.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you. I much appreciate it. I was one of these people who was really worried about the Cranley Leisure Centre because I thought it would be a casualty of COVID. And I'm absolutely delighted that in the executive report that came out last week or whenever it was, that they highlight some really, really good news in that. And now they've got to come up, they've got to make sure that they deliver on their promises, and I'm absolutely sure they will. And I do hope to God that this is real hope for Cranley, because it's what they deserve, it's what they expect, and it's what they have been working hard towards for such a long time. We put up with a leisure centre that you know, has been a poor relation to the rest of Waverley, and now our opportunity, I hope, will be fulfilled. I do think there's some important points there that would raise a few concerns with regards to the future and the financial responsibilities. You know, given, despite the uncertainty, as mentioned before, of Brexit, a second peak, ceasing as a council, I think all of those things should be put to one side, and we should actually spearhead with this project and make sure that Cranley does get a leisure centre. So I am absolutely delighted. I think this is great news, and I think the idea of keeping it on the agenda and making sure it's delivered upon is essential to the residents of Cranley. And may I also echo the points that were made by Tasmin. I'm a member of Cranley Leisure Centre, and I was very sceptical about going back because I didn't like the idea that I had to ring up and make an appointment, and I was just like, oh, it's just going to be really, really difficult. But instead of freezing my membership for a further 6 months, I decided to bite the bullet, and I made an appointment to go back last week. I went twice. I could barely move afterwards. It was like if you've been to the gym for years and you suddenly don't go for 6 months. Believe you me, the pain was excruciating. What I would say, Cranley was absolutely brilliant. They're well prepared, well organised. It was seamless. It really was. I was really, really impressed. And I must say, I was really impressed with one of the very young personal trainers who I saw on Saturday, a young lad called Joe. And he was just absolutely brilliant. The knowledge these young people have, the enthusiasm for their job they have. They want to see people come back to the gym. They want to see people get fit and progress. They want to see us doing stuff. And I think I argued this before, you know, I never failed to understand how we could see pubs and restaurants open before we could see places like leisure open, because at the end of the day, our health and well-being is far more important. So well done to Cranley. I was sceptical, I was wrong. I've been back, I'll continue to go back. And I think what we should be doing now is pushing for members to go back, because the facility have done everything in its power to keep its members safe. And I know numbers won't reflect the actual financial income at the moment, but hopefully in time it will improve, it will get better. And I'm delighted. And I, for one, will be keeping a very close eye on this and expecting that we will be delivering on our promises and that Cranley in the future will get a leisure centre. Kelvin was absolutely right. Doing nothing is not an option. If we don't do something soon, Cranley Leisure Centre will fall down round our ears, and it's going to cost the residents of Waverley a great deal of money. So well done to this executive, the portfolio holders and the officers and this administration, because it's a great report. I'm really looking forward to the new leisure centre in Cranley, and I'll be watching it very closely until it's open. And I'll be keeping my membership up until that time as well. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Okay, I am going to move us along now because we are a couple of minutes over and I like to keep on time. Yasmin, if we can talk through the corporate performance report, can I ask you just to refer to the items that come under our remit to scrutinise, because we have in the past gone on to other areas that aren't ours, and if we can talk about anything that needs to be raised rather than just go through each and every item. If people go to page 32 of their papers, which is page 2 of obviously the performance report, it shows the pages 14, 19 and 23, which have the items that refer to us. And if we can just keep to those, please, Yasmin.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think it's best if I hand over to the heads of service to bring out any of the highlights from their sections of the report, and then open it up to members to have the most input. So I think we've got Kelvin comes before Andrew. So if you're happy to hear briefly from Kelvin and then answer any questions.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will be brief. Obviously, the report is there for all to read. It splits into 2 phases, really: the COVID emergency response and how that impacted upon my specific service. And as I've alluded to in the report, you know, very many of my team were redeployed to focus on the emergency, helping with business loans, business grants, phoning those isolated in our community and vulnerable, and also just focusing on the emergency. In addition, what you'll find is, as we were key parts of the RCT programme, a lot of my team became part of the project management of each of the projects, 2 of which you've had reports on tonight. The rest will be going to value for money next week. The next phase, obviously, is the recovery, where we actually open leisure centres. That's has been touched on. We've had a huge amount of use of our green spaces over this period of time as people have stayed and used the facilities. And I'd like really just to commend my green spaces team. And in addition, I think what I've been extremely proud of as well as our assistance with the emergency, is how Wavy Training Services, Careline and Building Control have really been able to adapt to a new way of working during the emergency and beyond, and kept supporting clients throughout lockdown, which I was very proud of. On some of the KPIs, I'll just bring your attention that obviously the leisure centres weren't open, so there is no data. But again, Building Control, Wavy Training Services continue to have performed well. Careline had a slight drop in numbers as we entered a period of not taking on new clients during lockdown. So for the last quarter and a bit, we haven't taken on new clients. But there was also some tidying up of the database that affected the figures, but they are now improving as we go into the next quarter. And that, I think, is my brief introduction. Happy to answer questions, Chair, if needed.
Okay, I'll go to Andrew first, and if we've got any questions, but we'll keep them limited. Andrew, is there anything you want to add for your area?
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've spoken quite a lot about our community resilience work, and certainly during the lockdown period, the communities team, along with the housing customer service team and others across, worked really closely together to provide that necessary service for our residents. It's been remarkable the way the teams have worked together. We've touched on that this evening. Safer Waverley partnership, hopefully we've mentioned in November we'll be doing our annual report, and I shall be inviting, or the committee will be inviting Inspector Samantha Adcock to come and to introduce herself to you and talk about the future work of the partnership with me in the borough. And then just the last sentence, the revised safeguarding policy was adopted by the full council in June, so that comes within the quarter that the report is covering. Obviously that is an ongoing sort of document that we look at usually every 2 years. We have an audit coming up called the Section 11 audit on the work we do with safeguarding for children, and there is also an audit now for adults at risk as well. So there'll be quite a lot of scrutiny of how we operate safeguarding within the council, and then we'll be updating the committee if there's anything that's sort of germane to that as we go forward. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Okay, open up if there's any specific questions.
Chairman, just if on page 56 we've got the complaints issues there at the bottom. I just wondered whether there was an explanation of it. I thought COVID might explain why we've gone down to 2/3 from 100% on the with the red ones at the end of last financial year, towards the end of last financial year. Is that explained by COVID and people not being able to staff not being able to respond? Because I know our staff put in a lot of effort to try and keep things normal and as services as good as possible throughout COVID. It's very difficult for all of us. I think is that explained there by COVID?
Right. I mean, obviously we haven't looked into that page because that doesn't come within our O&S remit, unless it's obviously complaints about community wellbeing services. So unless Yasmin has or Louise, in relation to community services, community wellbeing, I don't really want to go into generic because that doesn't come within our remit. And the officers wouldn't have prepared for stuff not within the remit. So Louise, is there anything, a very quick answer? If not, we'll have to leave it to another committee.
Yes, Chairman. I mean, our complaints officer, Sue Petzold, has been extremely busy during all this time. So with some quite complex complaints. So although the numbers have gone down during this period, she has been very busy on some quite complex cases. The Housing Ombudsman and the Local Government Ombudsman both suspended their work for the lockdown. In fact, one of them has only just started up again. So yeah, that's all I can say really on that.
Okay, any other questions? I can't see any. So it's just two things for me. Firstly, my apologies because we're 9 minutes over, and I do try and like to keep our committees on time, but I thought I was doing well, and then some of the conversations obviously got a little bit more interesting, but that's good. And I think it's opened up our next committee meeting for a greater debate on the corporate strategy. So I think that's everything, other than to say to Yasmin, as I think this is your last meeting, a sincere thank you from me as chair for the absolute brilliant service that you've provided, your professionalism, your dedication. And what's good for me is if I mention something to you, I know it's going to be done, and I know it's going to be done really well.
Oh.
An absolutely huge loss for Waverley. I think Guildford we can call them the poachers for stealing you. I know it's a good career move, and I'm sure everybody from this committee would echo, you've been an absolute star and you'll be sorely missed. I know Louise has not put in anything that you're going to hold the mantle and everything else, but Yasmin, you've been a star. Thank you. I would like the minutes to record our gratitude on behalf of everybody, but as the chair especially, your role has been absolutely essential. So we wish you well. I'm sorry I couldn't keep your last meeting to time.
More to enjoy.
I'll blame everybody else for talking too much. Good luck. You'll be missed. I'm sure we'll come across you in some guise. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. It's been an enjoyable last meeting. I'm glad it was this committee. Thank you.
And to everybody for their attendance tonight and their commitment and sort of contribution. I think sometimes our questions aren't easy to put and the answers aren't easy to give. But I think we just keep chipping away. We will get the leisure centre. We will get some of these answers and we will make progress. So thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. I hope the cricket hasn't finished for those who wanted to. I'm looking at one person in particular I know is really interested. Louise, has it finished?
Not quite, but it looks as though Australia are just about to, could actually win. They need.
Maybe